This wasn't about dishes, food, or a sink. It was about resentment. And Janelle admitted it. What emerges from this episode is not a minor domestic dispute over kitchen etiquette, but a revealing portrait of long-simmering resentment, passive aggression, and emotional immaturity masquerading as family dynamics. The infamous kitchen incident, food deliberately pushed down the drain in a household already struggling financially, was not merely inconsiderate. It was symbolic. In a cramped trailer, with children on the way and resources stretched thin, deliberately wasting food was an act of quiet hostility. It was retaliation disguised as carelessness. More revealing was the later admission that this behavior was intentional. The willingness to damage one's own living environment simply to spite another person speaks volumes about the emotional toxicity already embedded in the relationship. This moment exposed something fundamental. The resentment between Mary and Janelle did not begin with Robin or with later conflicts. It was present from the beginning, baked into the structure of a marriage that required one woman to watch her former sister-in-law become her husband's new wife. The fact that this emotional landmine is still treated as a minor inconvenience rather than a profound betrayal remains astonishing. Even more striking is Janelle's persistent inability, or refusal, to acknowledge how this arrangement might have caused lasting harm. While others have shown at least some capacity for reflection, regret, and growth, Janelle continues to treat the situation as though it were merely misunderstood logistics rather than emotional devastation. The concept that marrying a close family member's husband might create resentment appears, even now, to remain elusive. Over time, this emotional detachment has manifested in more practical ways. Janelle's long-standing avoidance of domestic responsibility has been repeatedly documented. Childcare was routinely outsourced to Christine. Household labor was treated as optional. Even basic parental tasks were frequently delegated. Responsibility, it seems, was acceptable only when it did not interfere with personal convenience. This pattern extends to finances as well. Her reputation as the responsible money manager rests on remarkably thin evidence. There is little indication of diligent oversight, only a consistent expectation that others would manage the details, while she ensured her own comfort. Efficiency, in this context, appears to have meant minimal involvement. The kitchen conflict, then, was not an isolated incident. It was the inevitable culmination of years of imbalance. Cleaning fell to Mary. Responsibility fell to Christine. Emotional labor fell to anyone willing to perform it. Janelle, meanwhile, maintained her distance, benefiting quietly from the system while contributing selectively. What makes this particularly ironic is the dramatic shift in public perception. For years, Janelle and Christine were framed as virtuous counterweights to Mary's sharper personality. Mary was cast as the villain, the others as long-suffering saints. Recent seasons have dismantled that narrative. The so-called nice wives are no longer immune to scrutiny, and their own flaws, pettiness, avoidance, and self-interest, are now impossible to ignore. Mary, for all her abrasiveness, has at least been consistent. She has never pretended to be endlessly agreeable. Her flaws are visible, acknowledged, and at times actively addressed. She has shown an uncomfortable but genuine willingness to admit mistakes and attempt change. In contrast, passive aggression wrapped in politeness has proven far more corrosive. There is, paradoxically, something more honest about open conflict than about years of silent sabotage. A direct confrontation would have been healthier than a prolonged campaign of clogged drains, emotional withdrawal, and unspoken resentment. Passive aggression does not preserve peace. It merely postpones accountability. Ultimately, this storyline exposes the emotional reality of religious polygamy more clearly than any doctrinal explanation ever could. It is not a harmonious system of shared love and mutual sacrifice. It is a hierarchy of convenience, sustained by denial and quiet competition. Growth is rare. Accountability is selective. Resentment is constant. Janelle's portrayal in this episode is not that of a misunderstood pragmatist. It is the portrait of someone who wanted the benefits of the arrangement without its burdens, emotional, domestic, or relational, while relying on others to absorb the consequences. In that sense, the kitchen was never really about food. It was about entitlement, avoidance, and the slow corrosion of relationships in a system that rewards emotional detachment and calls it strength. Clean, confrontational, instantly reframes the entire narrative, and it forces viewers to keep watching to see it proven. Janelle has long benefited from a reputation as the sensible, low-drama counterweight within the family. That image, however, has not survived recent scrutiny. What emerges instead is a portrait far less flattering. A woman remarkably comfortable excusing male behavior, minimizing its consequences, and sidestepping accountability with a smile. Her interactions with Cody are particularly revealing. Rather than maintaining emotional distance or centering the impact of his actions on their children, she appears momentarily charmed by his flattery. So much so that his ego is treated as a nuisance rather than a long-standing problem. The absence of any meaningful reference to her children during these exchanges is conspicuous, as is the subtle impulse to defend him. The bar is not merely low, it is subterranean. That same evasiveness appears when discussing her entry into the family. The linguistic gymnastics required to avoid phrases like sister-in-law or married to her brother are telling. The facts are uncomfortable, so they are danced around. Humor becomes a shield, most notably in the anecdote about deliberately shoving food down the sink drain, a moment recounted as quirky rather than what it actually signifies: entitlement and a casual disregard for shared labor. The implication that someone else inevitably cleaned up the mess only underscores a long-standing pattern. These patterns did not develop in isolation. Sneaking around with a married man, attempting to secure a wedding date on another wife's birthday, and engaging in years of passive-aggressive power plays all contribute to a context in which Mary's so-called difficulty looks less like a personality flaw and more like a predictable response. Rewriting that history as harmless or amusing is not honesty. It is revisionism. The larger disappointment lies in the persistent myth of growth. Leaving Cody was necessary and commendable, but departure alone does not equal transformation. Christine remains deeply entangled in the unresolved consequences of a fundamentalist upbringing, including an unexamined reliance on male validation and an unwillingness to interrogate her own shortcomings as a parent. Janelle, meanwhile, consistently chooses the path of least resistance, employing soft manipulation rather than confrontation, and mistaking avoidance for maturity. Of the original 3 wives, Janelle appears to have done the least therapeutic work. Her worldview bears the imprint of guidance filtered almost exclusively through religious authority. Comforting, perhaps, but limited. There is little evidence of sustained self-examination, integration, or a desire to dismantle ingrained beliefs. The result is a familiar posture: calm on the surface, stagnant underneath. Ironically, the most compelling growth appears in the next generation. Maddie, in particular, stands out as someone who has clearly engaged in meaningful self-work. Whatever direction her personal beliefs may take, there is an unmistakable clarity in her ability to see her father without illusion. That kind of discernment does not happen by accident. It suggests reflection, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, precisely the qualities still missing from her mother's narrative. In the end, Janelle's problem is not that she left Cody. It is that she seems determined to carry the same unexamined loyalties and excuses with her, repackaged as independence. Growth requires more than exit. It requires reckoning. Here's what actually counts as aggressive in this family, and it's not Mary. Janelle's reaction to Mary's response during Cody's latest so-called apology tour is less revealing of Mary's temperament than it is of Janelle's increasingly selective moral compass. What unfolded was not an act of unchecked aggression, but a woman declining to perform gratitude for an apology that arrived late, defensive, and dripping with self-interest. The true measure of growth was never going to be the apology itself. It was always going to be how the surrounding cast responded when Mary refused to shrink. Christine, notably, passed that test. Despite a long and openly strained relationship with Mary, she recognized the dynamic at play. A man delivering a hollow apology, followed by a woman asserting boundaries, and immediately being cast as difficult for it. Christine resisted the familiar impulse to reinforce the narrative of Mary as volatile, and instead acknowledged the obvious. Standing up for oneself is not a character flaw. The fact that this recognition came from someone who had every personal reason not to extend generosity only underscores the sincerity of her response.
Janelle, by contrast,
Leaned eagerly into old habits. She reframed Mary's measured assertiveness as aggression, while glossing over Cody's behavior, which, once again, set a new low for performative remorse. He entered the conversation confrontational, deflected blame, and even managed to take a swing at Mary's closest ally before the dust had settled. That this was interpreted as acceptable, while Mary's refusal to placate was deemed excessive, speaks volumes. This pattern is not new. Janelle has repeatedly minimized or ignored Cody's most overtly aggressive moments. The raised voices, the physical intimidation, the finger-pointing, the slammed doors, the thrown objects, the looming posture. These incidents were either excused or quietly erased, while Mary's calm but firm pushback suddenly became evidence of a hostile personality. If this is the standard by which meanness is measured, it raises uncomfortable questions about the reliability of Janelle's long-standing claims regarding Mary's behavior in the early days of the family. Claims she and Cody remain oddly alone in recalling. Compounding the frustration is Janelle's apparent fixation on comparatively minor slights. Cody's remark about another wife being the shy, pretty one has been revisited with remarkable persistence, while far more damaging statements and actions directed at her and her children have been met with silence. The imbalance suggests that the issue is not disrespect itself, but which version of disrespect feels personally threatening. Taken together, this season has steadily chipped away at the image of Janelle as the pragmatic, fair-minded observer. Her willingness to extend endless grace to Cody while recasting Mary as unreasonable for demanding accountability exposes a double standard that is increasingly difficult to ignore. Assertiveness, it seems, is only acceptable when it comes from the right person. And Mary has never been that person in Janelle's narrative. What remains is a disappointing but clarifying portrait. One woman moving beyond old scripts, another reinforcing them, and a man whose worst behavior continues to be rebranded as passion, while the women around him are expected to absorb the fallout quietly. The biggest lie Sister Wives sold viewers was who the real villain was. Cody Brown's favorite rhetorical sleight of hand has always been selective accountability. When conflict arises, responsibility is vaguely acknowledged. I failed to protect, while the actual human consequences are carefully reassigned. Janelle is framed as the wounded party, Mary as the aggressor, and Cody as the unfortunate man caught between female discord. It is a familiar narrative device, and a deeply dishonest one. Mary Brown was cast early as the show's designated villain, a role reality television eagerly requires. Viewers were invited, encouraged even, to interpret her sharp edges as cruelty rather than survival. What went largely unexplored was the context. A young woman entering polygamy, watching her husband marry her former sister-in-law, on her birthday, no less, and proceed to have child after child with other women while she struggled with infertility. That is not casual jealousy. That is sustained emotional trauma. Cody's silence is often more revealing than his speeches. Mary is rarely named outright, instead reduced to implication and euphemism, a technique that allows blame without accountability. Meanwhile, Janelle's behavior, passive, strategic, and occasionally destructive, is softened into practicality or emotional restraint. Even actions that verge on sabotage are reframed as misunderstandings rather than deliberate choices. The result is a moral imbalance that rewards quiet resentment and punishes visible pain. Mary's so-called villainy was largely the crime of expressing discomfort too loudly. In a family culture that worships endurance and discourages dissent, her refusal to suffer silently made her the problem. Hurt without validation calcifies into bitterness. Frustration without language turns into behavior others label as difficult. Mary was not manipulative because she enjoyed conflict. She was reactive because she was unheard. Janelle, by contrast, perfected the art of plausible neutrality. Reserved, thoughtful when prompted, and emotionally distant by default, she benefited from a system that equated quiet with maturity. Her history with Mary, entering the family through deeply personal betrayal, was never properly acknowledged, let alone resolved. Instead, Mary's reaction to that betrayal became the focus, while its cause faded conveniently into the background. The broader irony is impossible to ignore. Cody styled himself as powerful and desirable, collecting wives, including his brother-in-law's spouse, while basking in the illusion of masculine authority. He celebrated expansion while ignoring the emotional cost, particularly to the wife who bore the brunt of it all and had the fewest outlets for relief. Polygamy demands emotional discipline, but it rarely offers emotional care. In the end, Mary Brown was not destroyed by malice, but by endurance. Endure till the end is not a moral virtue when it requires erasing grief, silencing resentment, and rewarding those who cause harm by pretending not to notice it. Mary did not emerge unscathed because she was never allowed to be understood, only managed, minimized, and ultimately blamed. The loud wife became the scapegoat. The quiet dysfunction flourished unchecked, and the man at the center continued to call it leadership. Never critique a reality show if you can't get the names right. There are many ways to critique a long-running reality series: its emotional manipulation, its revisionist storytelling, its spectacular commitment to dysfunction. Yet, one of the most persistent failures surrounding sister wives has nothing to do with plural marriage or interpersonal collapse. It is spelling. Despite years of on-screen captions, episode titles, and repeated verbal reinforcement, a startling number of viewers remain unable or unwilling to spell the cast members' names correctly. These are not obscure background figures. These are the central characters whose names appear in every opening sequence, every chyron, and every storyline recap. And still, chaos reigns. Mary, for example, is not Mary. The distinction is not subtle, phonetic, or debatable. Her name is displayed prominently throughout the series, attached to homes, events, and family milestones. Yet, Mary persists, stubbornly and inexplicably, as though the correct spelling were a matter of opinion rather than basic literacy. Janelle fares no better. Somehow, her name is repeatedly transformed into Janelle, despite the fact that the show has never featured a Janelle and has gone to great lengths to spell Janelle's name correctly for over a decade. The same carelessness extends to Christine, who is routinely inflated into Christina for no discernible reason. Even the mockery staples are not spared. Cody's name contains a K, not a C, and Robin's includes a Y, not an I. If the intent is satire or criticism, accuracy would at least lend it credibility. Misspelling undercuts the point and replaces critique with confusion. More troubling is the continued misuse of names that have been explicitly changed. Dead naming is not a harmless typo or an amusing oversight. It is a refusal to acknowledge stated identity. Whatever opinions exist about the family dynamics, ignoring a person's chosen name is not commentary. It is negligence. The errors extend to the children as well. Aspen, Peyton, Brianna, Maddie, Mykelti, Gwendolyn, and Isabel are routinely mangled beyond recognition. While some confusion around less frequently referenced names may be understandable, the sheer volume of incorrect spellings suggests a broader pattern of inattention. In short, the show provides the answers repeatedly, in large, readable text, episode after episode. Continuing to get the names wrong is not an innocent mistake. It is a failure to engage even minimally with the material being discussed. For a fandom that prides itself on close analysis and strong opinions, one might reasonably expect mastery of the most basic detail of all, the names of the people involved. Janelle says she doesn't care, and that's the biggest red flag of all. Over time, the emotional math has shifted dramatically. Sympathy for Janelle steadily erodes, while Mary's reputation benefits from the rare luxury of context and reframing. As for Robin and Cody, there remains no rehabilitation arc to be found. Their screen presence continues to confirm a complete absence of redeeming qualities, a consistency that would be impressive if it weren't so exhausting. Janelle, once positioned as the grounded and rational counterbalance, now reveals a far less flattering reality. The affection for Cody never truly dissipated. It merely went dormant. What emerges instead is a self-preserving pragmatism wrapped in a quietly inflated ego. Her posture suggests independence, yet her behavior repeatedly betrays a lingering emotional dependency. Even her formerly solid alliance with Christine shows visible strain, undermined by conflicting priorities and unresolved loyalties. Her response to Cody's hollow apology only reinforces this shift. Rather than clarity or detachment, it exposes how easily old dynamics resurrect less admirable traits. Re-entering a toxic structure rarely brings out anyone's best instincts, and Janelle is no exception. The problem is not vulnerability. It is denial. The insistence that she is unaffected contrasts sharply with her actions. This contradiction defines her current portrayal. Janelle proclaims indifference while remaining the most openly sarcastic and derisive of the original wives when it comes to Robin and Cody. The pattern is unmistakable. Verbal disengagement paired with behavioral fixation. Passive aggression replaces honesty, and calculated presentation replaces authenticity. More telling is her apparent need to remain relevant within Cody's orbit. She is the lone figure who still poses a symbolic threat to Robin precisely because she is the most likely to re-enter that dynamic. That possibility lingers not because of love, but because attention, any attention, still outweighs principle. Children, pets, and grandchildren fade into the background the moment Cody offers even the smallest gesture of validation. At this point, the resemblance to a familiar archetype is unavoidable. The woman who deprioritizes everything when male attention is in play. Watching it unfold inspires less concern than secondhand embarrassment. Janelle's carefully curated image of emotional detachment collapses under scrutiny, revealing someone far more reactive, calculated, and inconsistent than viewers were led to believe. Meanwhile, Mary's trajectory quietly improves. Long edited into a caricature, she now benefits from a narrative correction that exposes how misleading earlier portrayals were. Her evolution does not require reinvention, only accuracy. The irony is that Janelle once seemed immune to this kind of unraveling. Now, she is its clearest example. This single comment reveals more about Cody Brown than years of confessionals ever did. Cody Brown's recent commentary on construction workers practicing polygamy was not an offhand remark. It was a carefully deployed insult, masquerading as social observation. Framed as skepticism about David's understanding of plural marriage, the language quickly devolved into a hierarchy Cody was eager to enforce, one in which he places himself comfortably above an entire category of people he finds distasteful. According to Cody's account, David's exposure to polygamy came secondhand, filtered through childhood memories of his sister's experience and shaped by associations with a bunch of construction workers that were polygamists. This, apparently, is sufficient evidence to dismiss David as naive, sentimental, and fundamentally uninformed. The implication is clear. Proximity to working-class polygamists disqualifies one from serious knowledge, while Cody alone retains the authority to define what counts as legitimate plural marriage. The choice of words is telling. Construction workers is not used descriptively, but pejoratively, bundled with anecdotes about having met such polygamists and finding them to be pigs. Whether the target is ethnicity, class, or both, The contempt is unmistakable. The comment functions as a dog whistle for cultural and socioeconomic inferiority, allowing Cody to signal disdain without ever naming it outright. If the remark is not about ethnicity, it is unmistakably about class, and Cody is determined to be seen as standing on the right side of that divide. This fixation on status is not limited to Cody. Robin, too, struggled audibly to articulate the distinction she wanted to draw between her version of polygamy and the kind she believes David understands, finally landing on the vague and revealing phrase, "different group." The hesitation spoke louder than the words themselves. Together, they appeared less interested in explaining differences than in policing boundaries. Who belongs in their world, and who does not? The irony, of course, is staggering. Cody's apparent belief in his own elevated standing collapses under even minimal scrutiny. His history includes living in cramped conditions, entangled family relationships that defy even generous definitions of propriety, and reliance on public assistance, while expanding an already unsustainable household. If this is the model of refinement against which others are judged, the criteria are remarkably flexible. There is also a striking lack of self-awareness in Cody's apparent revulsion toward polygamist communities associated with poverty, legal evasion, or questionable practices. Large polygamist groups with deep ties to construction work and migration, including those that relocated to Mexico to avoid U.S. law enforcement, are hardly obscure. Pretending ignorance of this context while sneering at its participants only underscores the selective amnesia at work. In the end, the episode reveals far more about Cody Brown than it does about David or anyone else. What masquerades as insight into plural marriage is, in reality, an exercise in class anxiety and moral grandstanding. Cody's need to diminish others, to label them unsophisticated, inferior, or morally suspect, betrays a deep insecurity about his own standing. The contempt is loud, the superiority assumed, and the self-delusion complete. Subscribe for more.